Okay, so let us get started. We are on the Mishnah on Pei Ches Amud Aleph. Before we get to our colorful learning aids today, we got to go through our Mishnah first and a different topic. So let's take a look inside. The Mishnah says, Klei halach mekadchen es halach umidos yavesh mekadeshos es hayavesh. The general rule of our Mishnah is that if you have a utensil that is specified for liquid measure, then it only sanctifies liquid. And if you have a utensil that is designated for dry measure, for storing dry goods, and as we'll see, the reason why the Mishnah changes the language and doesn't say klei yavesh, but it says midos yavesh, is because generally the only kinds of utensils that are used exclusively for dry are measuring cups, the isaron and the half of the isaron cup. So those, whereas you have more generic containers for liquids. But basically, we learned previously that just like the mizbeach sanctifies the things that are placed upon it, so too utensils that are klei shares, ministering utensils, sanctify their contents, such that they become subject to me'ilah, and such that they're usable for the mizbeach, and so forth and so on. So what the Mishnah is qualifying is that that's only true if you put dry goods in a utensil that's meant for dry goods, and if you put liquid in a utensil that's meant for liquid. However, ein kli halach mekadesh es hayavesh, v'lo yavesh mekadesh es halach. But if you switch it and you put liquid in a utensil that's meant for dry goods, or if you put dry goods in a container that's meant for liquids, then those objects do not become sanctified by being placed in the kli shares. And we're going to qualify that in a moment. Next, klei hakodesh shenikvu, im osin bohen mein malachton shayu osin vehin shleimim, mekadshim v'im lav ein mekadshim. So if you have a kli shares and they become broken or damaged in some way, such that they have a puncture, let's say, in them, so as long as they can complete their function and they are still intact, so then the halacha is they sanctify their contents. But if they no longer can perform their originally designated function because the hole causes leakage and so forth, so then they do not sanctify their contents. V'kulan ein mekadshin ela b'kodesh, and finally, no ministering vessel can sanctify its contents unless it's inside the Beis HaMikdash. If it's outside the temple, it does not have that quality. So the Gemara now says, Amar Shmuel lo shanu ela midos avol mizrakos mekadshin. So Shmuel severely qualifies the law that says that if I have a utensil meant for liquid, it can only sanctify liquid and not dry goods. The qualifier is that's only true if it is a measuring cup for liquids. But there are utensils that are called mizrakim, bowls that the Torah identifies, that are used both for collecting blood, but also can be used for collecting flour. And therefore, those kinds of utensils can sanctify both liquids and dry goods. Just because they're meant for liquids does not preclude them from being usable for dry goods, and therefore they sanctify dry goods as well. The only thing that our Mishnah was addressing was something that is meant specifically for measuring liquid. Since it's never used for dry goods, it doesn't sanctify the dry goods. Shenamar shenehem mileim soles. And how do I know this? Because in the famous passage in Parshas Nasa, which talks about the gifts of the Nesiim at the Chanukas HaMizbeach, it says that there was a Mizrak Echad Kesef, there was a bowl that was made of silver that was filled with soles for a mincha. So you see, flour for a mincha is a dry good, and yet it was still sanctified in a bowl, which is meant for liquids. So Amarle Rav Acha midifti l'Ravina mincha lachahi. He says, I don't understand what you're saying. A mincha, granted that there's flour in it, but there's also oil in it. So it has moisture. How do you see from there that something that is completely dry, like just flour, can be sanctified also by a bowl that is primarily used for liquids? So Amarle lo nitzracha ela liyavesh sheba. So I'll give you two answers. One answer is that it's impossible to suggest that a flour and oil mixture that is for a mincha is completely homogeneous and uniform in its mixture. Invariably, there are going to be particles of flour that are not covered in oil, that are touching the walls of the utensil, and those too are sanctified. So that in itself is proof that the mizrak can sanctify something that's completely dry. Another answer I'll give you is that even a flour particle that's covered in oil is considered dry in comparison to blood, which is normally what the mizrak is used for. And that's all I need to prove, that even though it's normally meant for liquids, it's primarily used for liquids, this bowl, but it can also sanctify things that are relatively dry, and therefore can sanctify all dry things.
You're dealing with basically a doughy mixture, though? It's more like dough?
No, it's not really doughy, I don't think. I mean, maybe perhaps in
some... Because the amount of oil versus the amount of flour.
Yeah, but still, it's not always so uniform. A lot of times, the mincha is bilula, right? In this case, it's bilula vashemen. It's mixed with oil. And yet, just because it's mixed doesn't mean it's uniformly mixed. Okay.
That's very true, because I know in my line of work, formula.
That's right, in pharmacology.
I really do. It's a lot of work.
Yeah,
right.
Sure. Especially there's no industrial machinery involved here, right? Now, Amar Shmuel, Klei Shares ein mekadshin ela shleimin, ein mekadshin ela malayin, ein mekadshin ela mitochan. So Shmuel says three statements again to qualify the sanctification quality of a Kli Shares. They only sanctify when they're intact. That seems to be what the shleimin means, which Rashi verifies. And Rashi says that it means that they have to be non-damaged. Also, malayin, they have to be full. Now, what does that mean? So it means that if I put in only, let's say this container holds normally a cup of flour, and I put in instead a quarter cup of flour. So that quarter cup, since it's not the requisite amount that normally is used for this container, does not become sanctified. And then finally,
also the question of oidef.
We're going to talk about that in a second, Mr. Freeman. You're on the right track. And finally, it only sanctifies that which is inside, and not that which is outside. Now, what does that mean? So we're going to try to understand what mitochan means. We'll see that in just a minute. So va'amrila, other opinions say, ein mekadshin ela shleimim umalayim umibifnim. And others say that what Shmuel said was slightly three different things. Shleimin is the same thing, malayim is the same thing, but instead of saying tochan, it says bifnim. So what's the difference between bitsochan inside them and bifnim and inside? So ika benayu birutze midos. The difference between the two statements is, like Mr. Friedman was alluding to, what about when you have something that's a dry good that is measured in a utensil and it's a heaping measure? So there is flour that is above the rim of the container. Is that sanctified by the container or not? So according to the first pshat, the word is bisochan, that the vessel only sanctifies things that are within the vessel below the rim. But according to the second version, it doesn't say bisochan, but it says bifnim, which means it's referring to the temple courtyard. It only sanctifies if the utensil is inside the temple, but it doesn't address the issue of a heaping measure. So presumably, the heaping amount that is above the rim would be sanctified according to the second version. B'masnisa Tana, now we have a brisa which includes all of them. Ein mekadshin el shleimim umalayim umitochan ubifnim. So all four are qualified in the brisa that the utensil has to be intact and undamaged. It has to have a full measure of content. If it only has a partial measure, that partial amount is not sanctified. It only sanctifies the contents that go below the rim, and only when it's inside the azara. Amar Rabbi Asi, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Lo shanu ela she'ein daitu lahosif. Avol daitu lahosif rishon kodesh. That which we said, that a partial amount of dry goods or liquids are not sanctified because it wasn't filled up to the top, that's only true if your intention was only to put in a partial amount. But let's say my intention is to put in a full cup of flour, but I put in a few grains at a time of the flour. So every small amount is sanctified immediately because you go according to the intent of the person pouring the flour into the utensil. Tanya nami hachi, malayim, ein malayim ela shleimim. We have a brisa to support this. The brisa says the word milayim in the pasuk, which means that they had to be filled with that amount, shows that the kli has to be totally filled in order to sanctify its contents. And on that, Rabbi Yossi says, Emosai bizman shein daita lahosif, avol daita lahosif rishon kodesh. That's only when you don't have the intent to add more flour, and you only put in a quarter cup, and you think that's all you need. But if you put in a quarter cup with the intention of adding additional flour to fill it up to the top, so then every small amount that goes into the kli is automatically sanctified. Next, ein kli halach mekadesh v'chulei. So we had said categorically in the Mishnah that if you put the wrong contents in the wrong vessel, so then it's not sanctified. What do we mean by that? If you put liquid in something that's exclusively meant to hold dry goods, or if you put dry goods in a kli that's exclusively meant to hold liquids, it's not sanctified. So does that mean that the contents, that the goods that are placed into the vessel retain their status of being totally chulin? So that's what the Gemara wants to clarify. Omar Ravi Tema Ravasi, Ein Mekadshin li karev, avol Mekadshin li pasel. No, what it means is that they're not sanctified such that now I can use it as in a sacrificial avoda, right? They're not ready yet to be used as a korban. However, they are sanctified to the extent that they are treated as kodshim, such that if they are not allowed to be removed from the azara, that's number one, and if they are, they become totally puzzle and unusable for any kind of sacrificial offering. And number two is if a tvul yom, someone who's gone to mikvah already but hasn't waited until the sun goes down, touches those items. Normally, if that was chulin, that would not at all in any way affect the item, but because it was already placed in a kli shares, even though it was the wrong kli shares, that item becomes tamei. Now, ika demasna la'aha. Some say that Ravasi's statement was on a totally different brisa, on the following: Ein meviin menachos unesachim uminchas behemo bikor min hameduma ve'ein tzarich lome me'orla v'kilei akerem ve'im hevi lo kadash. The brisa states as follows: that when you bring agricultural goods to the temple to be used in a sacrificial service, those goods have to be edible to every single Jew. If they already, before they're made holy, are not usable, are not consumable to any Jew, so then they can't be used in a sacrificial service. So the first example is meduma, which is truma mixed together with chulin. It's edible, it's consumable, but only to a kohen. So therefore, I can't bring a mincha or bikurim from those items that are prohibited to a Yisrael and only permitted to a kohen. I can't use those in my sacrificial offerings. I can't use that as a korban. And certainly, if it's forbidden for all Jews, including kohanim, such as orla and kilayim, then surely I cannot use it as part of a korban. And the imhevi lo kadash. And if I try to bring it, it's not, and I put it in a kli shares, it's not sanctified. And on that, Omar Ravi Tema Ravasi, lo kadash li karev avol kadash li pasel. That which we said that if you put it in a kli shares, it's not sanctified. It's not sanctified to be usable as a korban, but it is sanctified insofar as that you have to treat it now like kodshim, such that it cannot leave the azara, and if it does, it's totally puzzle. And furthermore, if a tful yom were to touch it, it would become tamei. Tanu Rabbana. Next. And now, the next pieces of Gemara are predicated on a principle that when you're inside the Beis HaMikdash is a place of royalty. And you have to treat your conduct and all of the things that you find in the Beis HaMikdash as if you're in the king's palace. Okay, so let's take a look. Klei kodesh shenikvu ein matichin oson ve'ein matichin l'sochan aver. That if there a hole, a kli gets damaged and it develops a hole, you don't melt the surrounding metal to seal the hole, nor do you plug the hole with lead, which was typically a sealant that was used for metal utensils. Now, what's the reason? Again, because we're going to see this principle, ein anius b'makom ashirus, that you're dealing with opulence and wealth in the Beis HaMikdash. Don't treat it like it's a poor man's possessions. When a poor man has a hole in a kli, he patches it up. When a rich man has a hole in a kli, what does he do? Throws it away and just gets a new one. And that's the way you have to treat your conduct in the Beis HaMikdash as well. Nifkamu ein mesaknin osan. If they develop a significant dent, you don't fix it, but rather you discard it. Sakin shenifkam ein mashchizin es pigin masa. If a knife develops a significant dent or nick, Rashi says it's not just the standard nick that happens regularly when in the course of slaughter. That happens all the time, but we're talking about a significant dent or nick that is very unusual. And it requires a special artisan to repair it. So that we don't allow you to do. We tell you just discard the shchita knife. Nishmita in machzirin osa. If the knife dislodges from its handle, again, we don't fix it, we discard it. Abashol omer sakin mitarefes haisa b'mikdash v'nimnu aleha kohanim v'ganzuha. And Abashol just relates that he remembers that there was a certain knife made of a very soft and malleable metal that would regularly develop nicks. Now we're talking about small nicks. And his point is not as far as the same subject, as far as a concern about treating the utensils as if they belong to a rich man, but rather a concern for the kashrus of the shechita. We used to have, I remember that there was one knife that after every shechita, there would invariably, you would discover a small pigima, you'd discover a small nick in the knife. And we were worried that over the regular use of it, a Kohen would miss it, and he would end up shechting with it, not noticing that it had become pugum, and so we decided that when it comes to soft metal knives, we're not going to use those for shechita anymore. So they hid it away. Tanu Rabbanan, now we get into a similar discussion about dealing with the Beis HaMikdash with a sense of royalty when it comes to the big day kahuna, the priestly vestments. Ein osin osam ma'aseh machat ela ma'aseh oreg, shenemar ma'aseh oreg. So first of all, you have to manufacture them in the most sort of professional way. So there's two ways of manufacturing garments. I think one way is the way that we do it typically today, is where we manufacture flat pieces of fabric, and then we stitch those flat pieces of fabric together to make a shirt, to make a jacket, to make a blouse, right? But the Kohen Gadol's garments, we're supposed to have as few seams as possible. And therefore there's a weaving process that allows you to weave it in a circular fashion. That was the way you were supposed to weave. I don't really understand it fully, because I'm not a weaver or a tailor, but apparently there was a different process that would result in fewer seams. Now, nisgoalu ein mechabsin lo beneter velo baal. If the big day kahuna become dirty, so then we don't allow you to launder them in different kinds of detergent like soap or limestone. Ha b'mayim mechabsin. So what Gemara says, what are you telling me? Only in detergent not, but in water you can. Water is less effective than these types of soap. So Amar Abaye hachi ka'amar. Huga'u b'mayim mechabsin usan beneter va'ahal. Huga'u leneter va'ahal af b'mayim mechabsin. No, what we mean to say is as follows. If the garment develops a light stain such that you could get rid of the light stain with just water alone, so then we allow you to launder the garment provided that you use detergent. However, if it develops a heavy stain such that you only could normally get that out with a lot of scrubbing and a lot of detergent, then we tell you don't use anything, not even water. Don't use anything on that, and then just discard it. And some say that not only do we not allow you to get out heavy stains, but we don't even allow you to launder light stains, because in general, a rich man, even when he develops a little tiny stain in his shirt or his tie, he just throws it away. And that's the reason why we have to treat temple clothing with even greater sort of respect and royalty. Someone pointed out, the Kohanim's work was not exactly clean. There was a lot of blood, there was a lot of oil, a lot of splashing, right? So, based on this Gemara, there must have been a huge business. The tailors must have had a great business manufacturing big day kahuna. Can you imagine how much the exchange of garments must have been? I'm not sure exactly what happened on a practical basis, but it certainly sounds that way from this Gemara. That's right. That's why Jews went into the Shmata business. Tana Rabbanan, Mi'il. So now this is where your handouts are helpful, because we're going to go through all of the 8 vestments of the Kohen Gadol. The first one that we're going to talk about is the Mi'il, which is the outer tunic that the Kohen Gadol wears. It's the one that has the little bells. That's the Kohen Gadol was the original guy who wore bell bottoms. But anyway, Mi'il kulo shel techeles haya. It was completely made of blue, out of the techeles. Shenemar vayases Mi'il ha'ifod kalil techeles. As it says, the Mi'il, the outer tunic, was made of blue thread. Shulav keitzad. What did you do at the hem? You know, what was dangling at the hem? Mevi tcheles v'argomon v'solah shani shezurin v'osa osan kemin rimonim shelo pitchu pihen u'chemin konaos shel kenaso sheberosh tinokos. So what you did is you took 3 different kinds of thread. Tcheles, argomon, which is a purple, and tolah shani, which is a red or a scarlet. You would plait them together, twist them together, and then through some kind of chachma, you would make them into little balls that resembled unopened pomegranates, little tiny unopened pomegranates. And the way that Rashi says, they are like little balls that are hanged by children on the helmets of soldiers. Now, I'm not really sure exactly how to describe this, because I don't think we have such an artifact that we can reference today. But the thing that I can think of best is that, you know, in out in the bush, in the outback, so they have these hats that have these dangling balls with a piece of leather or a piece of string, and when you walk around, they swat the bugs that fly all around you.
They suggest from the Roman helmet style.
From the Roman helmet style. But what is that hanging from the Roman helmet?
That's the konaot.
Ah, that's interesting.
I think that's what he's saying, konaots.
Okay, so it's sort of like that mane.
Sharp point or cone.
Sharp point. Yeah, but the only problem with that is that doesn't conform to any kind of diagram that we have today as far as what the rimonim look like. So the rimonim certainly didn't. The rimonim certainly didn't look like that, at least in the diagrams that we have. So again, what? We're talking. It's just a comparison. It's saying at the hem of the Kohen Gadol's mi'il, we had these things called rimonim. But the Gemara describes the rimonim in 2 different ways. They look like unopened pomegranates, plus they are like suspended like they are from a Roman helmet, or that children suspend from the helmet. So I was thinking more that it's basically describing the way that they're suspended by a little string, and at the end of that string is the little pomegranate. But I'm not sure. Umevi shivim ushnayim zogim shebahem shivim ushnayim invalin v'toleh bahen. Shloshim v'shisha mitzad zeh, shloshim v'shisha mitzad zeh. And then you get 72 little bells with 72 little clappers, and you tie them also to the hem of the mi'il, and as the Meforshim point out, you alternate. 1 bell, 1 pomegranate. The Torah says 1 bell, 1 pomegranate, pa'amonim v'rimonim. Pa'amon v'rimon, pa'amon v'rimon. A bell, a pomegranate, a bell, and a pomegranate, just like in your diagram. And there were 36 in the front and 36 in the back. Rabbi Dosa Omer Mishum Rabbi Yehuda Shloshim V'Shisha Hayu Shmona Esrei Mitzad Zeh Shmona Esrei Mitzad Zeh. And Rabbi Yehuda disagrees, and he says no, there weren't 72 bells in total. There were only 36 bells in total, 18 in the front and 18 in the back. I don't know what the basis of this machlokas is, but certainly one is a multiple of 2, is the multiple of the other. It's either 72 or half of that 36. And as we know, there could be 72 letters in one of the names of Hashem. 72 is a multiple of Chai. So it's really unclear as to where this comes from, and I don't have an explanation. Amar Rebbe Inini bar Sason ki machlokas kan kach machlokas b'maros negoim. But however we're going to understand it, just like there's a machlokas whether it's 72 bells or 36 bells, we also have a similar machlokas of 72 versus 36 when it comes to the discussion of how many different shades of tsaras are there. So Ditnan Maros Negoim Rabbi Dosa ben Hurkinus Omer Lamed Vav, Akavi ben Mahalalel Omer Shivim Ushnayim. That one Tana says 36 different shades of tzaras, and the other one says there's 72 shades of tzaras. And as Tosfos points out, it's no coincidence that there's a connection between the Me'il and the laws of tzaras, because as we'll see momentarily, one of the things that the Me'il atones for is the speaking of Lashon Hara, which also is the reason why a person develops tzaras. And we'll get to that momentarily. Va'amar Rebbe Inini Bar Sason, Lama Nismacha Parshas Kabranos LaParshas Bigdei Kahuna. This Rebbe Inini, which we really don't find throughout Shash, it's an unusual name, but he's very focused on the Bigdei Kahuna. He says, why is it that in Parshas Tzav, after all of the Karbanos are detailed, the Karban Ola, the Karban Chatas, the Karban Asham, then Hashem turns to Moshe and says, take the priestly vestments and adorn Aaron. Why that connection? Lomar lecha mar Karbanos mechaprim af Bigdei Kahuna mechaprim. That it's to teach you that just like the Karbanos have an atoning quality, so too do the Bigdei Kahuna themselves atone for certain sins. And then we're going to go through the list. Kisones mechaperes al shvichus dam shenemar vayishchatu siirizim vayitbelu es hakutones badam. The ketones, which is the first shirt that the Kohen wears, both a regular Kohen and a Kohen Gadol, that atones for acts of murder. As it says by Yosef's brother, that they slaughtered a goat, and then they dipped Yosef's ketones pasim in blood to pretend that Yosef was dead. But you see, it's associated with murder. That the breeches of the Kohen atone for licentiousness, acts of sexual crimes, because as we know, the Torah describes the breeches as covering nakedness. So covering and atoning are really the same thing. Mitznefes mechaperes al gasei haruach minayin. And how do you know that the turban atones for arrogance, which is not a specific crime, but rather a state of mind that is criminal? So how do you know that? Omer Rabbi Chanina yovo davar shebegoiva v'yechaper el goiva. So the answer is that let something that goes on top of a person's body atone for that top feeling, that height that a person feels in his mind, or that haughtiness that a person feels in his mind. Avneit mechaper hir ha'lev, the sash atones for sinful thoughts of the heart, because heicha de'iseh. And why? And what's the association? Because you tie the sash right over right around where the diaphragm is. So that is where the heart is. So therefore, it atones for the place where the heart is, where the seat of sinful thoughts. By the way, the sash is also 32 amos long, which in gematria is leiv. Now, choshen mechaper al hadinim shenemar v'yasisa choshen mishpat. The breastplate atones for miscarriages of justice, as the Torah says that the function of the choshen is to bring justice. Ephod mechaper lavodas kochavim shenemar ein ephod utrafim. The apron that the Kohen Gadol wears, that atones for acts of avodah zarah, as it says that. And of course, this is sort of like pulling words out of context, but we use it nonetheless. Ein ephod utrafim. When there is no ephod, then there is trafim, then there is idolatry. By inference, when there is an ephod, ein trafim, there is no idolatry. Mi'il mechaper lashon hara, so the outer tunic atones for lashon hara. Minayin amar Rabbi Chanina yavo davar shebakol v'yachaper al kol hara. Because let something that makes noise through the clanging of the bells, let it atone for the noise making that was done in an evil way by speaking lashon hara. V'tzitz mechaper azus panim. V'tzitz ksiv v'hayol meitzach Aaron u'v'azus panim ksiv u'meitzach ishazon ha'hayolach. And how do we know that the forehead plate of the Kohen, which says Kodesh Lashem, and that he wears on his forehead, that atones for what's called azus meitzach, again, an emotional state of impudence, of chutzpah? So the answer is, because the Torah says that it shall be on the meitzach, on the forehead of Aaron, and the forehead is described in the context of impudence, because it says in Sefer Yirmiyah that you have the forehead of a lewd, a prostitute. And just like a prostitute is a brazen person, so too the forehead plate atones for brazenness. So the Gemara now says, Eini, is this really so? V'ha'amar Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi shnei dvarim lo matzino len kapara bekarbanus, matzino len kapara mimakom acher. But one second, this brisa seems to contradict that. This brisa says that there are certain things that we don't find, specific sins that the karbanos do not address, but that there are two other things that do address and have an atoning quality over those two things. The Eluhain, Shvichus Damim v'Lashon Hara. The two specific sins that karbanos do not atone for are murder and Lashon Hara, but there are two mitzvos that do atone for them. Shvichus Damim me'egla arufa v'Lashon Hara miketoris. What atones for murder? It's the egla arufa ceremony, where you find a corpse and you break the calf's neck to atone for the unescorted guest who was murdered. And Lashon Hara, what atones for Lashon Hara is the offering of the incense inside the heichal on a daily basis, and we'll explain why in just a moment. The question, however, is like this: how can you tell me that the Bigdei Kahuna atoned for these things, for murder and for Lashon Hara, if according to this brisa, it's not the Bigdei Kahuna that atoned for these things, but rather the specific mitzvahs of Egla Arufa and the offering of the Ketoris? And now the question is, let's just elaborate further on this. The Tani Rav Chananya minayin leketor shemechaperes. As the Bryce explains, how do you know that Ketoris atones in general? Shenemar vayitenas hakatoris vayichaper al ha'am. As we know in Parshas Korach, that when there was a plague, Aharon put Ketoris in a censer pan, and by burning the Ketoris, he was able to stay the plague. The Tani devei Rabbi Yishmael al ma Ketoris mechaperes al lashon hara. Yavo davar shebechashai v'yechaper al ma'aseh chashai. And why is it that it atones for lashon hara? Because the Ketoris is offered by a single Kohen. When no one else is in the Heichal, he offers the Ketoris. So let something that is offered privately atone for words that are spoken privately between two people when they whisper to each other about what someone else has done. So that's the association. So kasha lashon hara, kasha shvichus damim, shvichus damim. So essentially the Gemara says we have a kasha. Here the Brisa indicates that lashon hara is atoned for through the Ketoris. And we just got through saying that Lashon Hara is atoned for through the Me'il and its clanging bells. And also, over this Brisa says that Shvichus Damim, murder is atoned for through the Egla Arufa, and we just got through saying that the murder is atoned for through the Ketonis of the Kohen. So which one is it? So La Kasha, Hadiya Diya Man Katle, Hadaloya Diya Man Katle. So when it comes to murder, we can easily answer the question. The Egla Arufa only atones for murder when we don't know who the murderer is. And all we have is a corpse. But what we're talking about, when we talk about the Bigdei Kahuna atoning for murder, is when we know who the murderer is. So the Gemara says, what? Idi yadua man kadle bar ketoluhu, b'mezid, bar ketoluhu. 1 second. If you know who the murderer is, then don't rely on the Bigdei Kahuna. Carry out the death penalty. The guy has to be put to death. So the Gemara answers, b'mezid v'lo asrube. No, we're talking about the guy committed murder, but he didn't get hasra, so he can't go to an ir miklat because he committed murder intent, first-degree murder, but he did not get warning in advance, so we can't put him to death. So therefore, we can only atone for it through the ketonis of the Bigdei Kahuna. Now, Rashi points out something very important. It's not that the murderer gets atoned for his act of murder, but it's the community that requires atonement for allowing a murderer to go free in our midst.
Well, that applies. That's why the Rufa makes sense.
That's the point. So just like the Egla Rufa atones for the communal responsibility for this murder, and we don't know who the murderer is, we also need an atonement for a murder that takes place when we know who the murderer is. And that's the connection between the two. That's right. And
why would we need an atonement?
Because we're allowing evil to fester within our midst.
Says we can't do it.
Correct. So you're stuck, but you're still Lamaisa. There's a miscarriage and there's evil that still exists. This person who is evil, we have to allow him to daven in the shul with us. He gets to have cholent with us and herring, and we have to allow him to stay in our community.
That'll kill him eventually.
Yeah. Okay. V'lashon hara nami lo kasha ha b'tzina ha b'farhesia. And also, there's no contradiction as far as lashon hara, because there are two types of lashon hara. There's quiet lashon hara that no one knows, like the gossip when two people are speaking in the back silently to each other. That is atoned for through the ketoris that is offered privately, right? But then there's public lashon hara, where a person's reputation is maligned in public, and that's an avera. And that requires a different atoning. That's not through the private ketores, but rather through the clanging bells, which is a much more public noise making, just like this was a public Lashon Hara noise making, and that's why you need that as an
So
atonement.
essentially what we're saying is all the big kahuna, this whole idea that we've been discussing here, is not kapara for an individual act that a person does. It's kapara for society, for the Jewish community.
It would seem that way.
Lashon Hara also.
It would seem that way,
Oh.
Lashon Hara, right. It's not, the individual who does the Aveira can't say, oh, well, I'm covered because the big day kahuna covered me. Yeah, the individual sinner cannot say that. However, the big day kahuna act as a siman, as a symbol for the community, and presumably it has that metaphysical quality that by us allowing Lashon Hara to fester, we need atonement as well. Yeah.
Sort of was like similar, like a link to Achan, was it by Yeshua, that if the community had done its proper share, this wouldn't have happened.
Correct. Yeah, there's a communal responsibility where there's a revut, there's communal responsibility. Hadron Allah HaMizbeach Mekadesh.